to our community and to the community around us. And we do that by having this opportunity to practice oneness, because that's really what we're about, is saying all of us together in our unified state is what makes our community the strongest. So I'm super grateful. I want to thank Dr. Mayfield. Where is she? Our deputy mayor and member. And I also want to thank Cynthia. Yes, I'm calling you in because I love the way you all call me in and say, we got to be doing more around this election. We've got to be doing more around accountability in our local politics. You know, this is near and dear to my heart. But she just reminded me. And so that's part and parcel with Dr. Mayfield's offer of how we got here tonight. So I'm just going to invite us to just take a moment to center for a second. This is 50 years of the East Bay Church of Religious Science. This is our 50th year, and our theme is celebrating our legacy, building our future. And this is a legacy of radical oneness. This is a place where people pray together who are Muslim and Jewish and Buddhist and Christian and atheist and all of the above. This is a place where people come together across all their perceived differences of race, gender, socioeconomic status. And this is a place where transformation happens, where lives are changed. So I'm just giving thanks for each and every person who showed up here or who's watching. I'm giving thanks for our elected leadership as they come here today in a spirit of oneness and community. I'm giving thanks for this teaching, for this philosophy, for this building, for the prayers that happen here, for the service that happens here, and for the heart and principles of who we are. And I release this word to the divine activity of law, which joyfully, delightfully says yes. And if you think there's a possibility that we could all manifest oneness and unity and get things done together tonight, I just invite you to join me by saying Ashe. Ashe. Amen. And so it is. And now I'm going to turn it over to my friend of 22 years who just happens to be the moderator tonight, Brooklyn Williams.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you to Reverend Jerika Blackman. Can we give one more hand for Reverend Blackman? All right. So I'm Brooklyn Williams. I have the honor of serving as the Chief of Education and Community Safety for Mayor Thao. And I want to thank all of you for being here this evening. We know that you could be anywhere. It's a busy Monday, top of the week, and you chose to spend your evening with us, and so we're very grateful for that. We don't take it for granted. And I want to extend a special thank you to our host, the East Bay Church of Religious Science, for partnering with us and for hosting us this evening. I will be your moderator, and we're going to try to jump into things as quickly as possible. I'm going to try to get us out on time. I first want to introduce Mayor Thao's full public safety leadership team. And each of these leaders oversees a critical component of Oakland's comprehensive public safety plan. This evening, you will be hearing from our mayor, Mayor Sheng Thao. You can clap if you want. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. You can raise your hand. We're doing roll call, guys. All right. We're going to also hear from our Department of Violence Prevention Chief, Dr. Holly Joshi, who will be with us momentarily. We're going to be hearing from our Police Department Chief, Chief Floyd Mitchell. They're next to the mayor. We also have our Fire Chief in the building. Our Chief, Damon Covington, is with us. He has brought along his macro manager, Mr. Elliot Jones, here on the end. So the fire department, including macro. We also will be hearing from our city administrator, Mr. Justin Johnson, who will also be joining us shortly, as well as assistant city administrator, Mr. Harold Duffy. And then we also have with us this evening our Oakland Department of Transportation director, Mr. Josh Rowan, who's here right here. All right, so each of these leaders will be giving brief presentations, and after that, I will be facilitating a Q&A session. There are staff members around the room, or a staff member, Eden right here, raising her hand, doing a little dance for you this evening. She'll be passing out index cards, and what we want you to do is, if you have questions, please write down any questions you would like for the panel of leaders to answer on a card, and then turn it back into Eden, who will make sure that those get up here to me. This evening, we are trying to strike a balance of providing important information that we know that folks are here to learn, and also making sure we leave plenty of time for question and answer, for specific questions that you all may have. And you will see me sorting them. Depending on how many questions we get, you'll see me clustering them into buckets, into themes. I prioritize the questions where we get the same question 2 or 3 times. And this is our 7th time, I think, doing this. And what we've learned is that many people have the same question. And so those questions will be lifted and prioritized, but we will try to get to as many questions as we can, especially those that fall into our theme today, which is clean and safe. And we will try to get to as many of those questions as we can. However, we know we might not be able to get to every single one. And so we want to make sure that you have signed in. If you registered for this event, then we have your email address, and thank you for registering in advance. If you did not register in advance, that's perfectly fine. We have a table in the back. Joe, can you raise your hand, and Mary are in the back? And we just want to make sure that we get your email address so that we can follow up with questions that weren't able to be answered, but also questions that were answered, so that you have that with you in your inbox. So please, if you haven't registered, please make sure before you leave, you give us your email address. And with that, I'm excited to kick us off by introducing Mayor Thao. Mayor Sheng Thao is one of the Bay Area's strongest and most effective progressive leaders. Her family story, escaping genocide, poverty, and abuse, has made her into a determined, empathetic leader. Her commitment to racial justice, building affordable housing, advocating for low-wage workers, and protecting tenants can be seen in her many accomplishments as a city council member, and drives her work to improve the lives of Oakland residents as Oakland's 51st mayor. Please give a warm welcome to our mayor, Mayor Sheng Thao.
Hello, testing. All right, good evening, everyone. It's such a joy to be with you all today. I just want to say, first and foremost, to this amazing team up here. This is my team, my executive team. Everybody we have been placed up here through myself and the city administrator, Justin Johnson, and they have been doing fantastic work. They have been working day in and day out, and today's our last town hall meeting, so I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for all that you do for this city. We are seeing a decline in our crimes. We are seeing that we are intervening before crime actually gets started. So I just want to appreciate, this team here. So I'm just going to do a really brief overview. We have 3 top priorities here in the city of Oakland. Of course, we have a team here. This is my executive team, and I thought it is incredibly important for all administration to kind of go out to the community to introduce the executive team to people so that people understand who's actually doing the work. So with that being said, our first priority is public safety. And under this umbrella of public safety, we have 4 different prongs that we are focused on: creating a robust police department, working with other agencies to actually layer resources, because we know we don't have enough resources. That's doing work in partnership with CHP, and the Sheriff's Department and others. And then leveraging technology, coming in, understanding that we don't have enough officers to go out when we get phone calls. It's not good enough for me that we just say, well, that's just what it is. And so with that being said, I worked closely with the Privacy Commission along with the City Council to do something that is history making. We were able to get a unanimous vote by the Privacy Commission and the Council for getting cameras, flock cameras, here in the city of Oakland, which we worked with the governor to actually get him to grant us these cameras. That's 290 flock cameras in the city of Oakland, 480 flock cameras in total in the East Bay. So what you'll see is that it's every single on-ramp and off-ramp will have a camera, but also hotspots in the city of Oakland. And that's the 290. We worked with the Privacy Commission to ensure that we are erasing the data that we collect. If it is not being utilized to be charged in a criminal offense, then we will be deleting that within 30 days. And that is the agreement and policy that we have on the books today. With that being said, it's also an issue where people call in for a priority 1. That means, someone is violently whether it's a robbery, a violent robbery in progress, or if there's a gun at an event or what have you. That's a priority one. And so we're working and planting the seeds right now for a real-time crime center and for an emergency response team with our drones. And so that is still all in the works, but that's still part of the leveraging of technology, so that if we can't get there, we can set up a drone so they can start recording the situation where officers can then go and apprehend the suspect in a safe manner. Of course, we can talk about all the reactive things, right? All of this is more of the reactive of like once the crime happens. We can't talk about this without discussing, all the upstream investments, and that is in our Department of Violence Prevention. In our Department of Violence Prevention, we are working with the highest risk individuals. This is completely something new. Previously, being run under the previous chief in the Department of Violence Prevention, we were more invested into, events within the community or what have you. We're still doing that from a different department aspect, but in the Department of Violence Prevention, we have life coaches that go after those who are at the highest risk, and that is part of our ceasefire program. Now, how many of you in here have heard of the ceasefire program talked about over and over?
Strategy.
What was that?
Strategy.
Ceasefire strategy. It's not a program, it's a strategy. All right, so for those who don't know about the ceasefire strategy, what it is that it is OPD working with the Department of Violence Prevention, however, and working with probation and the district attorney's office. Now, there's one list, and Dr. Joshi is going to explain this to you, but there's one list that OPD operates off of, and there's another list where you may not have the evidence to go after this person, to arrest them. And so what we do is we send out our case managers to actually go in and intervene and give them the option of actually saying, look, you can turn your life around. We can give you the resources that you need to turn your life around. Otherwise, once you get on the list for OPD to come after you, you are off our list, and we can't then support, right? And so Dr. Joshi, the chief of Department of Violence Prevention, will speak a little bit more about that. But the ceasefire strategy, it is data-driven. Meaning we go off of the data. This is proactive policing. Proactive policing, and this is why we are seeing crimes decrease within the last year. Because coming into office, I wanted to understand, with the crime on the rise, I wanted to understand, well, why was it that from 2012 to 2019, there was a decrease almost by 50% in homicides and property crimes? And what we did was I worked with Kaiser to actually get an audit funded, and the audit showed us that there is a correlation between when the ceasefire strategy sunsetted, right? And that was by the previous chief and the previous administration. They sunsetted the ceasefire strategy and put into play the Violent Operations Crime Center. And what they did was they would go after people with warrants. That is reactive policing. And what we saw was that crime started going up. So resurrecting the ceasefire strategy is key. And what we're seeing is that right when we implemented it, starting in January of this year, we just started seeing crime trend downward because we're being proactive. All right, so that's the first prong on priority, is public safety. The second prong is clean streets.
2 minutes, Mayor.
2 minutes, okay. Clean streets. It's important for us to have clean streets. First of all, we want our kids to have clean streets to walk to school on. When we talk about clean street, as you all know, I've issued an executive order around encampments. The prioritizing that we're doing with encampments is that we are offering every person that we're asking to leave with shelter and housing first and resources. However, if they're in a priority area, meaning in the parks, near a rec center, stealing electricity from the electricity pole, let's say under the freeway, under the underpasses, that's critical infrastructure, we're going to have to move you. We're going to have to move you even if you don't take our shelter and even if you don't take the resources. We have to make sure that our sidewalks are ADA accessible for people who are utilizing wheelchairs. And for me, my North Star is making it clean and safe for our children. With that being said, another factor is we're always thinking about how we don't have enough money, enough resources in the City of Oakland, and so we're being proactive around economic development. I'm a renter and I've never been a homeowner. However, that $20,000 that's taxed on to the property tax, it's a barrier to entry. It is a barrier to entry, and not just that, it is a barrier for current property owners who just may own their own home. And so with that being said, this is why we've invested into Ramondi Park in West Oakland. We took down the largest encampment in West Oakland, which is Wood Street. Again, offer everybody shelter. 85% of the people took the shelter. And then in that same spot, we built out over 100 units of affordable housing. Under this administration, this is history making. We're investing over $200 million into affordable and deeply affordable housing and affordable senior housing. With that being said, of course, this is also the economic development is happening at the Coliseum. My main areas are West Oakland and Deep East Oakland, especially the Hagenberger corridor is a priority corridor because, of course, it's the gateway to Oakland. When you have guests come over to your house, you're gonna clean your house. You know, you don't want to have people show up and it's a mess. And so right now, Hagenberger is a mess. And so that is my priority corridor. We're selling our half of the Coliseum because the other half is actually owned by the A's / the county. So we're selling our half so that we can finally have one owner of that area and we can start developing and create the catalyst that we need to actually get our economic development going so that we can get new streams of revenue. When we get the new streams of revenue, we can fund the youth programming. We can then fund for more officers if that's what we choose. We can fund for more Department of Violence Prevention life coaches. But without new streams of revenues, all we do is go back and tax the same people we constantly tax, which is all of you in our small businesses, and that's not okay. So with that being said, I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. All right, so before we move to the next presentation, I just wanted to repeat for those of you who may have just joined us that Eden is here walking around with index cards. If you have any questions for us, please take a card from her, write down the question, and give it back to her, and she's making sure to get those up for us. We're gonna do 2 more presentations, one by our Department of Violence Prevention Chief, one by our Police Chief, and then we'll stop and take some questions that are specifically about crime and safety before moving on to the additional presentations about Clean City. So, up next, we have, also, there, I didn't see you, hey. We have District 1 Councilmember Kolb here. I want to acknowledge you and thank you for coming and being here this evening, Councilmember. All right, so with that, we are going to move to Dr. Holly Joshi, our Chief of the Department of Violence Prevention. Dr. Holly Joshi has vast leadership experience and a track record of successfully implementing evidence-based violence prevention and intervention strategies. Prior to taking on leadership of the Department of Violence Prevention in December, she led nonprofit organizations focused on improving community health and safety and spent 14 years at the Oakland Police Department. While there, she held various roles, including the head of the Vice and Child Exploitation Unit and Chief of Staff. She was a member of the executive team that successfully implemented the ceasefire strategy in partnership with community leaders over 10 years ago. She is an East Oakland native. Shout out to East Oakland, I gotta do that. Widely recognized for her expertise in the intersections of gender-based violence and gun violence, and her deep collaborative relationships across the city. Please give a warm welcome to our DVP Chief, Dr. Holly Joshi.
Thank you, Brooklyn. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. I know it's a busy time, busy season, and there's lots of other things that you probably have to do today. So spending time having this conversation with us tonight definitely speaks to your passion and your care for Oakland, so thank you. And Councilmember Kalb just said to me a couple of weeks ago, when are you all going to do a public safety town hall in my district? So here we are. I'm Holly, and I came back to the city after being gone for 9 years, 9 months ago. And the reason I agreed to come back to the city was because of this administration up here's ability to convince me that they understood what holistic public safety needs to look like in the city of Oakland. When I was going through the interview process, Brooklyn and the mayor and the city administrator were talking to me about ceasefire and that was going to be their #1 public safety priority, and were asking me how I felt about it. Well, luckily, I was at OPD on the executive team when ceasefire was brought to Oakland the first time. From 2012 to 2015, I was a part of the team that implemented ceasefire the first time. So they had me at ceasefire. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, but I want to reintroduce folks who may not be as familiar to the Department of Violence Prevention as you could be, and part of that is on me, I'll admit. I've been back for 9 months and have been really working, putting my head down to make sure that the department is functioning at the highest level that it can be. But the department was created in 2017 by former council member Lynette McElhaney. And unfortunately, she experienced a series of personal tragedies, and that's what lit the fire for her to begin her advocacy for Department of Violence Prevention. She lost her son and her nephew to gun violence in 1 year. She began working with folks like you in the community, advocating for a Department of Violence Prevention, and we got one, and the first chief came in 2019. So I'm the second permanent chief of the department. Our 3 goals have stayed the same. What has changed in the past 9 months is how we go about those. So our goal is to reduce homicides and shootings, to reduce gender-based violence with a specific emphasis on commercial sexual exploitation, and then to reduce the levels of community, family, and individual trauma associated with those types of violence. We do this through 2 ways. Number 1, I have a deployable team of violence interrupters, intensive case managers who we call life coaches, and gender-based violence specialists available to me as a deployable city resource. These are city employees who work for me, and I can deploy them to the field to focus on those most at risk of violence. Secondly, we give out about $15 to $20 million in grant money every single year from Measure Z tax dollars to 25 different community-based organizations that are also working on the most vulnerable folks in this city. So I'm going to today focus a bit of time on the deployable team that we have working at the city, because they are working specifically on the ceasefire strategy that we just re-implemented in January. So as my first order of business was to come in and re-implement what is called focused deterrence. It is the most studied, the most data-driven, and the most research-driven gun violence intervention and prevention program in the country. Not just in Oakland. The mayor rightfully spoke specifically about the reductions that we saw in Oakland between 2012 and 2017. But this is a strategy that's been studied across the nation. And so this is not just something we're doing here. Our part of that work is the social services outreach. So I'm going to very briefly tell you all what violent crime investigations used to look like at OPD before ceasefire and what they look like after ceasefire, because I was there before and after. So before, the Oakland Police Department would put together a list of the folks that are most vulnerable to gun violence. And when we say vulnerable, we mean that people who are at most imminent risk of picking up a gun, either shooting someone or being shot within the next 90 days. So we're talking about gang and group involved people that are running through the city, shooting one another, shooting other people, committing robberies, home invasions. We're talking about the very small percentage of people committing violent crime. OPD would create a list, and they would create List A and List B. List A would be the people that are currently arrestable. Those folks, they would go after with their warrants, they would take the case to the DA's office, they would get it charged, regular, typical police work. List B were the people that they believed were driving violence, but they didn't have enough to arrest them. What would happen with List B is they would linger on a list for who knows how long while the police are trying to build a chargeable case. Building a chargeable case is not easy. And so when people linger on a list, oftentimes they either continue to engage in violence and wreak havoc in the community, or they end up killed. So the beauty and the magic of ceasefire is that List B now comes to the Department of Violence Prevention. So every Friday, the Department of Violence Prevention shows up to a meeting in the mayor's office, and we get List B from Chief Floyd's team. And we relentlessly pursue those individuals who we believe are at the center of violence but not currently arrestable, to offer them an off-ramp. I have a credible messenger model, meaning the vast majority of the people on my staff are, number one, from Oakland. They have lived experience of group and gang violence themselves, and they've survived the carceral system and come out on the other side of it. So they're the living, breathing, walking example that there really is a way out of the cycle of violence. And so we relentlessly pursue them to get them on our caseload. And then from there, it's creating a life map and life goals and offering them everything from job training to sometimes relocation out of Oakland if that's the only way to keep them safe. So I'll end by saying that this community violence intervention work that we're running out of the Department of Violence Prevention is not Oakland specific. This is a growing field. I had the privilege of going to DC 3 months ago, invited by Kamala Harris's office. Her office is the first federal office that's created an Office of Gun Violence Prevention specifically focused on investing in this type of work across the country. So she's pumped $200 million into communities across the country to continue this work. You all are the first community group that I'm able to announce that we are getting $2 million of those dollars into Oakland to continue the work. So although we're in a tough budget situation, our work is being noticed and our work is being funded by people that care outside of this city about making sure that we move forward with a public safety strategy that isn't an either or. You know, that narrative about, is it about more police or is it about more community-based programs? It's about both. It's a both and conversation. We have to have intervention and prevention, and we have to have the police. And I'm really happy to sit up here and say that I work very closely with OPD, and we stay in our lanes. So thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Joshi. All right, we're going to do one more presentation by our Chief Floyd Mitchell before we start with some questions about crime and safety. Chief Floyd Mitchell began his career as a patrol officer with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. After 25 years of impeccable service with Kansas City, he accepted the police chief position for the city of Temple, Texas. In 2019, Mitchell was appointed as the 23rd police chief for the city of Lubbock, Texas, where he served until September of 2023. Chief Mitchell is a veteran of the United States Air Force. He has earned both his BSA and MBA degrees in business administration from Baker University and is a graduate of the Certified Public Manager program administered by Texas State University. He is a graduate of the 236th Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Academy, Quantico, Virginia, and the Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute for Policing at Boston College. A man that has traveled many places and is now with us in Oakland. Please give a warm welcome to our new police chief, Floyd Mitchell.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the warm welcome. Very happy to be here. This venue is a lot cooler than our last venue, I can tell you that right now. It was really hot in the last one there. But super excited to be here. I've been here for just under 5 months. As Brooklyn stated, I came from Lubbock, Texas. I've been there was there for just at 4 years and made my way here. So been in policing for a long time and enjoyed my career and learned a lot. And I believe it's been very helpful as I've been here. Talk to you a little bit about your police department. The Oakland Police Department has approximately 686 law enforcement officers and 320 non-sworn professional staff. And a lot of people don't really realize that is you have a large staff of non-sworn people that help us in the back office piece of it, whether it be our dispatch, whether it be our crime scene techs or administrative professionals that do a lot of things with us. So you have a very nicely positioned police department from that standpoint. When I first got here in May, one of the first things that Mayor Thao and I talked about was the summer safety plan or the public safety plan, and that's one of the first bullet points on my slide there. So we sat down and talked about it with my staff about what does a public safety plan look like for the city of Oakland, and what are we going to try to do here. And the main thing was to reduce homicides and reduce gun violence across the city of Oakland throughout the summer and as we move forward. And I want to share with you a few stats that will kind of identify what has occurred in Oakland so far this year. So from January 1st of this year until September 25th of this year, we have seen a 27% decrease in the number of homicides or murders within the city of Oakland. We've also seen a, thank you. We've also seen a 14% decrease in the number of aggravated assaults. These are assaults where someone is shot, stabbed, or severely beaten. We've seen a 14% reduction in the number of rapes. We've seen a 24% in the number of robberies, armed robberies and strong arm robberies across our city. And we've seen a 53% reduction in the number of burglaries, that is auto burglaries, home burglaries, and business burglaries. Now, there's a caveat when we talk about our burglaries. Because we allow victims to report some of these crimes online, there is a delay in our reporting. So when I report 53% decrease in our burglaries or our property crimes, I want you as my public to understand that we have not counted all the data yet. There is about a 2 to 3 month delay in some of those numbers. So while it may not be 53% reduction in there, once we catch up with all the numbers, we know that with a reduction that large, there is a pretty substantial reduction in our number of property crimes. I say that to say this. We can tell our community that the crime has gone down throughout our community, but it's also important for us to understand how our community feels. And we know that our community doesn't feel safe based on the number of crimes that occur within our city. So we're working hard to, one, keep that information out there and be visible throughout our community so to make our residents feel safer as we go about our business. One of the things that we're doing in regards to addressing crime throughout the city is working in our Crime Gun Intelligence Center. These are task force that we partner with our federal, state, and county partners with to identify those that are using weapons, guns specifically, in the committing of crimes. We take those guns, we identify the shell casings, and we try to piece together a map of who is using what gun. So when we catch somebody with a gun, we can go back and connect the dots of those folks that are using guns and then prepare the proper charges to submit to the DA's office. These criminal investigations go to our criminal investigations division. There are detectives that are on standby that when we have a violent crime, they are dispatched to those crimes right away so they can get good information, relevant information, up-to-date information, and start try to identify suspects that are involved in these robberies, homicides, and things like that to put cases on them. Also, we want to make sure that we are doing traffic enforcement. We've had a couple of high-profile fatality accidents that have occurred throughout our city this year. So prior to me getting here, we instituted our traffic unit, and we have a sergeant and 7 officers that are out there on motorcycles that are giving out tickets and enforcing and being very visible as we try to reduce vehicular traffic crimes throughout our city as well. The other big piece that I think is important is partnershiping with the other city departments. Just like Dr. Joshi talked about, partnering with the Department of Violence Prevention, partnering with the fire department and their micro unit that you're going to be hearing more about here in a little bit, and partnering and coordinating with our other again, state and federal law enforcement partners and our prosecutor's office. We also partner with the state attorney general's office to present cases to those and our federal prosecutors as well. Community support and engagement is also important to us, making sure that we are in constant contact with our business improvement districts or our BIDs, our faith-based organizations, as well as our school organizations as we work together to address the crime and the presence of crime throughout our community. We do this by having extra details like sideshow activities. Every weekend we have a sideshow detail that is out there on Saturday nights and Sunday nights. We also have a vice decoy that addresses the human trafficking that occurs throughout our community. And we're working on several other initiatives to work on that specific issue because we know it's a problem. We also are spending a lot of time and money in regards to our technology, whether it be ShotSpotter, in which, when we have a firearm activation, it automatically notifies us, and we can dispatch officers to investigate those scenes, and it's been very valuable to us and saved quite a few lives. I got a briefing this morning in regards to our deployment of Flock license plate reader cameras. To date, we have just over 204 cameras that have been activated and are being used today to help us address crime throughout the city, and it's been very valuable just in the small amount of time that they've been active. So very excited about that technology. On the third slide, we talk about high visibility, the foot patrol, the overtime assignments. That kind of goes along with some other things that I've talked about in the use of our special resource section and crime reduction section to help us have high visibility and address those individuals that are causing harm throughout our community. So with that, I will stop, and I think this is where Brooklyn goes into questions, and I wanted to make sure we left time for that.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Chief Mitchell. Under time, I appreciate that. We picked up 3 minutes. Okay, so while we just shared a bunch of information for you all, we're going to get to your specific questions and allow these leaders to perhaps do a deeper dive on some of the topic areas that you've already discussed. The first one, let's go ahead and start with 911. So they are asking, there's a few different questions. People are wondering about the status of the waiting time and availability, and what can we say about improvements to 911, and what can people expect in the near future?
So coming into City Hall, I can tell you that, so prior to being mayor, I was a city council member, and prior to being city council member, I was chief of staff to another council member. So understanding how the whole system works have been very helpful, because we came in and immediately knew that we had to do something about 911. The actual data says that the statewide requirement is you must pick up a 911 caller's call as a dispatcher within 15 seconds. Well, coming in, only 35% of the 911 calls were being picked up within 15 seconds. That's obviously a failing grade. We get over 1 million calls in the city of Oakland, and just to give some context, the city and county of San Francisco, they're double the size of us in population and in regards to resources, money, and they get half of the calls that we get here in the city of Oakland. And so with that being said, there were about 20 vacancies in the dispatch center when I came in as mayor, and I knew that we had to fast track and hire for these positions, because when you call 911, it is probably your worst day, and you deserve for someone to pick up the call in a timely manner. I've tried calling while I was a council member. I got the busy signal, completely inappropriate. And so what we did was we invested $2.5 million into our infrastructure. That is our technology. Now, I can tell you that a lot of elected officials, they will come in and they won't fund this infrastructure because it's not easily seen, right? You can't see it, you can't touch it and feel it. But thanks to the city council members, they were able to put aside the $2.5 million, and we were able to update this infrastructure. Not only that, but we are now hiring our dispatchers in a way that the same way that we hire firefighters and police officers, and that is in a cohort. We know that dispatchers have a hard job. It's emotionally taxing going from call to call to call, and it's everyone's worst day. And so with that being said, we are doing ongoing hiring. That's the difference that we're making. We've hired for all of these vacant positions. Right now they're being trained with a senior dispatcher, and so I can tell you that today our call time, 51% of our calls are now being picked up within 15 seconds. Is that perfect? Absolutely not. We're going to continue to work towards that, but it's better than 35%. And envision next year, come next year, where these dispatchers who are still paired up with the senior dispatcher, when they're able to dispatch on their own, right? That's only going to make put us in a better position in regards to our call time pickups. More so than that, we invested into our CAD system, and this will allow for our dispatchers to see and dispatch out to officers who are closer to the incident of the scene. And so that's also going to actually help with deploying our officers and our firefighters. And then I'll hand it over to the chief.
Yeah, so I think it's important for our community to understand that because we get hundreds of thousands of calls each and every year, that we have to triage or process each of those calls. And to do that, we prioritize our calls for service. And they're priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what these are, if it's a priority 1 call, it is a life-threatening call, meaning there's someone that's involved in a very serious accident, someone's been shot, there's a robbery in progress, there's something deadly is going on. And then we prioritize down from there, whether it's a property crime or a vehicle accident or just something suspicious going on. We do this so we can dispatch immediately to those calls that are life-threatening and it could cause someone to lose their life, and they have to go down from there. So if it's a suspicious car that you saw driving in your neighborhood, or someone that's walking down your alley that you've never seen before, and you make that call, it may be some time before we're able to dispatch on that call. And if we have an officer that's assigned to that call and a higher priority call comes out, the dispatcher is going to divert that officer to respond to that priority 1 call. So some of these things get pushed down further and further on the list. I know this is not comforting to some folks who have something going on, and they're like, well, why did it take the police so long to get there? Like I say, the only way that I can explain it is we have to prioritize calls, because we do not have the resources to send someone to a lower priority call before someone's that's in a higher priority call system that we have to send somebody to. So that is how the system is built, and we follow that process as best as we possibly can.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Mitchell. I just also want to add that there's been some studies, I want to say in the last couple of years, that have shown that upwards of 50, maybe even 60% of our calls that come into 911 are not technically emergencies, and those calls jam up our lines. We only have so many lines, and so we're trying to do a better job of educating the community about what kind of calls are appropriate for 911. Your car being towed, for example, that's not a 911 call, right? We get lots and lots of those, and they jam the system. So just asking folks to think about whether that call needs to go to 911 or another number, which we're going to get into because folks want to know what other numbers can be called. Okay, so I'm going to get, these just came in, but I think it's a good one to follow up. So there's questions around dispatch. Obviously, folks feeling like if they can't get through, then maybe there's not as many crimes being reported if the 911 line is jammed. So what do we say to folks who are questioning the crime reduction stats that were just mentioned? And what can we say about that in terms of the accuracy of the data? I know you shared that, but anything else?
You know, when the Part 1 property crimes, the crimes that I read off to you, that is someone that is a victim of a crime, meaning someone has injured someone else. So I can stand by those numbers any day of the week. As I spoke to, the property crimes, because there is delay, because you can report that crime from home and it has to go through our vetting process, that takes some time to catch up. And we know that there's a certain number of crimes that people do not report. You know, they've got their car broken into or some damage to their car, and they're like, you know what, I'll just call my insurance company and be done with it. We want you to report your crimes because all we can report on are the crimes that are reported to us. I cannot give you a definitive number on the guy who has his window broken and he or she chose not to report that crime. We report, just like all the police departments across the United States do, on the crimes that are reported to us. And the information that I've given you is very, very verifiable.
Thank you. I would also add that, as the mayor mentioned, the 911 call response was lower when she came in, and now it's higher. So you would actually think there are more crimes being reported because more people are able to get through 911. So just in terms of deductive reasoning, that's something to consider. Okay, so this question is about what is or is not happening in other neighborhoods and towns and cities. We might not have the answer to this because we are obviously focused on Oakland. But what is or not happening in neighboring towns and cities that contribute to their low crime stats? Or lower, right? So is there something that we do differently than neighboring jurisdictions that might contribute to a lower crime rate?
I will tell you what we have done with Ceasefire and the team that we have working to address violent crime across the city is being modeled throughout the United States. We're doing it right. One of the things that I think is important when you talk about reducing crime is you want to deter crime as well. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can so when someone is thinking about committing that crime, they're like, no, I don't want to do that because I know I'm going to be held accountable to that. So I think it's important for us to make sure that our community understands that we as the police are one piece of the process. We identify the subjects, we write the reports, and we present the case to the DA's office. The DA has a role to play in that, as well as the judges and the correction institutes as well. So we are but one piece, and we're doing the best we can in regards to ours, and we pass it off to the DA's office.
All right. Okay, we're going to keep moving. This person is a homeowner and rents affordable units in a small building. They say there have been several incidents of car theft, vandalism on the block. The cameras that they have are not able to identify license plates, and so they're wondering if the new cameras will be able to pick up on that info.
The new flock camera system is a very high-resolution camera system, and it works very well. You know, there's different cameras that you can buy for your personal home and your businesses, and we're looking to, at some point in time, stand up a real-time crime center to where we can have people monitoring our cameras 100% of the time. But right now, if a crime occurs at your business or at your home, when that detective or that officer goes out to investigate that, they do what we call an area canvass, and they're going to knock on your door or your business and say, hey, do you have cameras? And they're going to pull that camera footage from your business and use it as part of their investigation. Those type of systems are expensive, and we would love for everyone to have very expensive, good, high-resolution cameras, but I can't go out and have everyone tell everyone to buy expensive cameras. But yeah, we do go out and look at all that footage.
Yes, and the city's cameras could potentially are stronger to be able to identify license plates. Is that right? And also other features on the car that make it distinct.
Yeah, they're license plate readers. So if something happens here and that car hits another flock camera in one of our neighboring jurisdictions, they'll get a hit on it that says, hey, that car was used, or that license plates on that car was used in a crime that happened in Oakland.
Okay, thank you, Chief. All right, this next question is about human trafficking, sex trafficking in particular. And I know a lot of folks have this question, especially those that live in the San Antonio neighborhood. But the question is, why are prostitutes allowed to be in our neighborhoods near schools 24/7?
Yeah, there was legislation that changed a couple of years ago that prohibit us from just stopping people because of how they're dressed and where they are. And that has caused quite a bit of consternation, I should say, for us, because we see them out on the streets and we know what they're doing. But we can't just go up there and stop them because of how they're dressed, even though we might know what they're doing. We have a vice decoy operation once a week right now, so we are working on the problem. It is a constant problem, but one of the things that we talked about at our last town hall was the market. There is a market out there, and we have to work to reduce the demand for the sexual activity that goes on our streets.
Thank you, Chief. Go ahead, Chief Joshi.
Yeah, I'll just add that from the prevention and intervention side, the Department of Violence Prevention has gender-based violence specialists that are specifically working to help those young ladies that are ready to get out of the life. We also fund organizations that are trying to do prevention work in the schools, working with folks. We know what the red flags are, right? So we know which students and which young people are most at risk of being trafficked. The average age in Oakland for the first entry into sex trafficking trade is unfortunately 13 years old. So in order to stop the flow of folks from getting trafficked in the first place, the Department of Violence Prevention is funding an organization to be inside 7 schools, and then another organization to run a daily drop-in center, so that if these folks find themselves in this situation, there's a space and a safe space where they can go at any time and drop in and get services and begin to undo the trauma bond that has typically taken place with their trafficker. I'll briefly just touch on what the chief was saying, which is, for the past couple of months, I've been working on a task force. It's the mayor's trafficking task force. Brooklyn Williams actually runs it. And we have been asking for the district attorney to assign an attorney to this task force, because everyone else is at the table. The community-based organizations are there, the survivor leaders are there, OPD is there, the Department of Violence Prevention is there, and we've been working on this since January without an attorney. And so, to the chief's point, it can be a revolving door of OPD doing what they're trying to do in terms of enforcement and accountability, but if we don't have an attorney at the table so that we can agree what the accountability plan needs to be, specifically for purchasers. Because like any business, and I hate to call it a business because we know that it's more than that, it's trauma, and it's a criminal, and it's abuse and all of that, but the way that the traffickers think about it is as a money-making business. And for any business, the most important part of the business is the demand side, because if there's no demand, there's no supply. And so going after the demand, or people coming into the city to often purchase young people, we have to have a plan for that. We have to have a values-aligned plan and stick to an accountability plan for that. And so we just got that district attorney assigned to the task force recently, and we've been in some difficult conversations, but we are working hard to find that alignment to make sure that we do have an accountability plan for the demand side of the equation. Because again, we can continue to outreach and continue to try to stop the flow and offer the young women and young people services and an off-ramp out, but we also have to have an accountability plan for the demand side of the equation.
All right, thank you, Chief Joshi. Appreciate that. We have a couple of related questions, so sticking with that kind of wavelength here. This question was specifically about what we're doing to prevent pimps from participating or enacting sex trafficking, and I think you just answered that, Chief Mitchell, as well. I'll just add that on the Mayor's Advisory Council for Human Trafficking, we have 3 subcommittees: prevention, intervention, and enforcement. And you'll find that as a theme in this administration. It's like what Chief Joshi said, it's not either or. You have to have a multi-pronged approach to any of these issues. And so prevention, intervention, enforcement, what Chief Joshi was speaking to was the enforcement's focus. This next question is about how the city is partnering with the school district. So sticking with this topic, I'll just share that our prevention subcommittee is very much focused on doing public awareness campaigns around sex trafficking, going upstream into the schools, teaching our young ladies and our young men about the signs of grooming, right? Because traffickers and pimps don't just kidnap people, they groom them into this life. And so they have already gone out to the schools at least once. They're going to be returning now that we have the new school year, and they are doing lunchtime, resource tables, and then also trying to get into the classroom. So we have partners at OUSD that are a part of this Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. So that's one example that I wanted to share while we're on this wavelength. Okay, so this next question is specifically about the number of police officers that we have. So the question is, what's the concrete plan to build the police department to full staffing, and if you can share some priorities in order to get there?
I'll start off. So right now, with the budget deficit, we came in about almost 2 years ago, and we inherited a huge budget deficit, mainly because of the pandemic, and we weren't able to get our numbers up in regards to transfer tax. That's when a home is bought or a building is bought, we do get that transfer tax. And so with that being said, we have to really balance out, and this is where it's critical for your participation, is that 2 years ago when we passed the budget, that, any budget is a representation of your values. And so with that being said, you have to clean the streets, run programming, and at the same time also make sure that you have staff and employees. So right now we are funded for 678 officers right now. That's what we're funded for. We have a little over 680 officers in the department right now. And the way that we're going to create a robust police department is through the economic development piece of it. Otherwise, we're just chasing our tail, and that's the truth of it. And so this is why it is so important for me under this administration that we go after creating new streams of revenue that will be permanent, that we can then actually fund enough police officers for the city. But we can't get to that point if we don't actually identify and then implement these new streams of revenue. And what's been really frustrating for me is that, the whole Hagenberger corridor in West Oakland, these are developable, if that's even a word, sites, right? Especially the whole Hagenberger corridor. I see that as the main area that we should have been investing in for decades. But yet now we're just planting the seed. And so my administration is planting the seed, come now a year and a half, so that we can see the fruition of that labor come in the future. Then we can fund more officers. With that being said, I will pass the mic over to the chief, but just so that you know, coming into office, unfortunately, this is the most officers we've seen on our streets because we hired a lot and moved forward with academies, thanks to the council members for pushing forward the 3 academies a year instead of just the 2. We see that we have the most officers right now on our streets than we've ever seen in the last 3 years. That's not saying much because we need more, but with that being said, there is a plan in place to get to that robust police department, and that means that we're going to need new revenue streams.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Right now like I said, we're budgeted for 678. We have just about 686 right now. I want to get my numbers right. The Office of Inspector General is doing a survey, doing a staffing study, I should say, to determine exactly where we should be, and we should get that study at the end of the year. The important thing to understand is, we know that we could use an additional 300 to 400 officers here in the city of Oakland based on its size, based on its population, and based on its crime rate. But what you have right now is a bunch of dedicated sworn and non-sworn personnel doing everything they can to keep this city as safe as it can until we get there. And we're going to continue to do that. So and one of the other things that I think is important to understand is, even if the mayor and the council were able to give us the money today to hire 300 to 400 more officers, it would take us years to do that. Because from the time you identify the vacancy to go through the hiring process, put them through a 6-month academy, and then put them through 4 months of break-in, to hire a police officer, it takes roughly 12 to 14 months to do. So I believe once we get that data back in regards to where the staffing study puts us, then we will work with city administrator, council, mayor to see what we can do to start moving up to that number. But again, it's going to take time to get there.
Thank you, Chief. So we're going to do about 3 more before we move to the presentations on Clean City, and then we'll, at the end, if we have time, we'll come back to some of these. And again, if we don't get to your very specific, some of these are very nuanced, specific questions, which is great. If we don't get to them here, we will be following up via email with your questions. Eden is in charge of that and has been working really hard to get all of the questions for all of our town halls back to folks. So staying within that, I think there's a question specifically about the number of cops in East Oakland, and this person is asking for an increased number. So can you share what the formula is for deploying officers and how we determine how many are in the East and the West and the North, for example?
Sure. When you look at most major metropolitan police departments, you have roughly 65 to 70% of your officers are in what we would consider patrol assignments, and we're the same here in Oakland. When you look at those that are out there on the street fighting crime from that standpoint, in uniform, car, and answering calls for service, and those specialized units that are out there addressing violent crime. The city is broken up into 36 individual beats. Each of those beats are assigned an officer for each of the 3 shifts. You have sergeants out there, you have lieutenants, and you have captains. One of the things that I think is going to occur with this staffing study is looking at how we're deployed, and that's going to be based on where the call for service workload is, or the demand for service workload is. And right now we're split up about 50-50, both west and east side of the city. And we know once we get this staffing study, it should also tell us that, hey, maybe more officers need to be assigned to East Patrol, or the east side of the city, because the demand for service is higher there than it is on the west side. We will look at that and then make those determinations when the time comes.
Thank you, Chief. And that goes, someone had asked specifically about the Hegenberger corridor, so what his answer also applies to assessing what's happening there and deploying officers accordingly. So this next question is for you, Chief. We're going to do a couple more. This is a training question. So what kind of diversity or
a couple of questions ago, but go ahead.
I know. Well, there's buckets here, so they see me over here working hard. I have 2 more buckets after this one. And so this one is about your training process for OPD, diversity, conflict, mental health related, conflict resolution training. Can you just speak to how officers are trained in engaging with our residents?
Yeah, so we have a 6-month training academy, and then we have what we call yearly in-service training, where officers have to go through yearly in-service training to get recertified on different things, and it alternates depending on what comes out of the legislation that year. But we do have officers trained in CIT. We have officers trained in mental health, and we want to make sure that we are teaching our officers how to de-escalate and how to approach different people in any type of situation. So there is a lot of time and a lot of investment in each of our officers to address these specific situations.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to do one more for you, Chief, and then I'm going to take the rest of them, okay?
Okay.
All right, so we have a few about sideshows. So what can you share about the city's approach to sideshows, what's being done about them, stop the madness?
Yeah, I have experienced burnouts and things like that in my other agencies, but coming here, understanding that it is a part of the quote-unquote culture here. But we're working hard to address the sideshow issues, and I know my friend from DOT, Josh Rowan, is going to talk a little bit about how they are looking at it from an environmental design standpoint. But we do have officers that work the different details that we have going on right now that are addressing sideshows. We have patrol officers out there as well that when they see people that are participating in these events that go to disrupt those type of events. It is very dangerous, and we treat it as such and make sure that we are communicating to folks via our social media that, hey, if you're involved in this, we're towing cars when we come in contact with these folks in these sideshows. We know it's very disruptive, and we know it's something that this community has experienced for decades, and again, working through DOT to try to prevent the locations, especially in those residential locations where these things occur, I think is a key piece.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to just quickly answer this one, which is, what is the mayor or DVP doing about drive-bys shootings on the freeway? And what I'll just share about that is that the freeway is under the jurisdiction of CHP. However, the flock cameras that were mentioned earlier, I believe, will be on the entrances and exits of all of the freeways, right? In Oakland, or most of them?
CHP, you know, of the 290 cameras that we own, CHP has the rest of that 400 plus cameras, and those are going to be on their on and off ramps. And when I look at the data, we have not had a whole lot of drive-by shootings on and off our highways so far this year.
Yeah, we hadn't. I think there was an uptick in the past, and I think folks. You could have a theory that people feel like they could do the shooting on the freeway because there's not cameras and it's easier to get away with that. But with the installation of these new cameras by the state and also the ones that will be in Oakland, it'll just be harder to get away with those things because literally you can't get off the freeway without there being a recording. So we should all know that about ourselves too, right? Okay, that goes for littering or whatever. We're being recorded. So, all right, this last question, I just really want to appreciate this last question. As you all know, I'm the Chief of Education and Community Safety. There's a reason why I have both of those in my title, and that's because we know, and this mayor knows, and this administration knows, that education is community safety. And that when we talk, clap it up for that, thank you. I appreciate you in the back. So there's several people, at least 6 here, who are asking to talk about what about prevention upstream. So we have anything from community centers, after school, summer jobs, employment, housing. And so folks are just really curious about what we're doing that's not just enforcement and the cameras and the different tools that OPD has. And then this one is specifically calling out the literacy rate of our African American students, that 30% of them are reading below grade level. I'd like to add that if you are not at a 7th grade reading level, you are 72% more likely to enter the criminal legal system. So I know there's been a lot of talk about 3rd grade reading levels, and that's important, but really if we don't get our young people to a minimum to 7th grade, you're exponentially likely to enter the criminal legal system. So I'll just share very briefly. Obviously, OUSD has their own school board, their own governing system, but we are partnering closely. Chief Joshi just talked about the school-based violence prevention resources that we have in 7 of our high schools. We are integrating violence interrupters, gender-based violence specialists, and life coaches into 7 of our most impacted high schools, so that's one example. The other thing I'll just quickly point to is we have 2 very specific funds. So we have our Parks and Rec department. We don't have anyone, I don't know if Justin or anyone else wants to talk about what Parks and Rec obviously does for after school. That's really important. But we also have 2 major funds in our city. We have what's called the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth that gives away millions of dollars each year to nonprofit organizations who are supporting services in schools and also in their individual agencies. And we have Measure Z funds, which is distributed by Chief Joshi's department, which contributes to all sorts of issues like employment, different types of training, et cetera. And then I'll just let the mayor maybe share what the investment has been in affordable housing.
So affordable housing is a priority under this administration. We are doing something historic. We are investing over $200 million into affordable and deeply affordable housing. That includes senior housing. And so many of those many of these projects are already shovel ready. And so the difference between how we're going to tackle this is that affordable housing developers right now, they're looking for tax credits so that they can actually pencil out and build out affordable housing. Well, the City of Oakland, we are in a very strong place because we passed Measure U. Thank you to all the voters who voted for Measure U. We are actually uniquely positioned because we are the only city in the county of Alameda that actually have our own affordable housing bond. And so that's going to make us very competitive at the state level for affordable housing developers to actually get those state credits so that they can build more affordable, deeply affordable here. Obviously, we have to do the preservation piece where we preserve any affordable housing stock we have, and of course, try to prevent homelessness from occurring. And so we do have a program where if all you need is help or assistance in regards to first month and deposit, then that's something that we can support you on. We all know that it's going to cost, government more money if we allow for someone to actually be unhoused and then rehouse them. So that's how we're moving forward with the affordable housing.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so at this time, we're going to move into the presentation by our fire chief, Chief Damon Covington. He has been Oakland's fire chief since October of 2023. Prior to this appointment, Chief Covington served in an array of capacities over his 24-year career with Oakland Fire. This includes firefighter, paramedic, fire engineer, lieutenant of fire. He was the captain of fire, captain of training, battalion chief, special ops chief, deputy fire chief, and he most recently served as our interim fire chief. Chief Cubs, that's what we call him. Educational accomplishments include a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Sonoma State and a master's degree in Executive Public Administration from Golden Gate University. Chief Covington was president of the Oakland Black Firefighters Association from 2016 to 2022. Previously served as the chair of Rodeo Hercules Fire Protection District, and he currently serves as an adjunct professor for Merritt College, where he lectures in the undergraduate fire science program. Please give a warm welcome to our fire chief, Chief Damon Covington.
Thank you. Good evening. Appreciate all you guys coming out tonight and hearing what we have to say, talk about public safety, and talk about how we're going to make our streets safer. We really appreciate you guys showing up, and I certainly appreciate the collaboration with the mayor and the city administrator and all my fellow directors on the stage. So I'm just going to give you a quick high-level overview of the fire department, some of our key initiatives that we're working on right now, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague that I brought with me, Elliot Jones, who's the macro director. Has anybody heard of macro here? All right, and an applause.
More than 4.
Thank you. Yes.
It's always 4.
That's the most applause we've gotten so far for macro. But we're going to talk a little bit about macro, and we want to tell you how you can reach macro and what our expectations are of you guys and hopes that we have in partnering for macro. The Oakland Fire Department is 470 sworn members strong. We have 5 different divisions within the Oakland Fire Department, starting with our operations division, which is the engines and trucks that you see driving around the streets responding to calls. They're responding from 25 different firehouses throughout the city, including the Oakland Airport. We have our dispatch center, where our call takers are, who dispatch the resources to the appropriate call throughout the city. We have our macro division, as we talked about. We'll talk about in a little bit. We have our EMS division, who handles all of our medical supplies and training for our EMTs and paramedics. And we have our emergency management division, which handles the overall emergency operations for the entire city. So that division trains us, prepares us for CERT and CORE, which I hope you guys are all involved in or will be involved in after this, as well as earthquake preparedness, active shooter, and all the other trainings that go on throughout the city. So the Oakland Fire Department, of those 25 stations, we respond to 85,000 calls from those stations. So many of our stations are very, very busy, but it's a very proud department, and you have more than 500 people who are excited about serving their Oakland community. So I say that to say there's an opportunity for all of our community of Oakland to be a part of the Oakland Fire Department. We actively recruit year-round for all divisions of our department. So we want to make sure that we are creating opportunities for our community, for our citizens of Oakland, to come in and serve alongside us, shoulder to shoulder, making sure that we have Oakland residents responding to Oakland residents. You know, Oakland is a very unique place. I tell people all the time, I've been lots of places in the world, but I've only been to one Oakland. Never been anywhere else where I said this feels like Oakland. So we want to make sure that we are recruiting and actively recruiting members of the community who understand what Oakland is all about and who want to serve the community. So I'm not going to take a lot of time today. I do want to talk a little bit about macro. Macro is our newest wing of the fire department. How many people knew that Macro was part of the fire department? 3, 4 people, okay. Macro is part of the fire department. Elliot's gonna go a little bit more in depth about Macro. Macro is our unit that responds to mental health crises and anything that's nonviolent, that's not indoors within the city of Oakland. Macro has just recently completed a 2-year pilot program and is growing by leaps and bounds. We want to make sure that Macro grows in the best way that Macro can grow to serve the community of Oakland. We've had a lot of growth in those 2 years. Macro is responding to an enormous amount of calls, but we want to make sure that Macro is scratching the itch of Oakland, if you will. So we want to hear from you. This upcoming meeting, if you go on Macro on the City of Oakland website, you'll see when our meetings are posted. This upcoming meeting will be our first public meeting where we're inviting the public into our Macro meetings, virtually and in person, so that we can hear from you as we continue to grow Macro. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Elliot Jones for a little bit more deeper dive into Macro.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, North Oakland, for coming out today. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. I'm going to keep it brief because I know you have a lot of questions, but let me just focus on maybe the key things. How to reach Macro. Well, what is Macro first? Macro is your non-police, non-emergency first response program within the fire department. We respond to low acuity, quality of life calls that often involve the unhoused, but we also respond to low-level behavioral health concerns. We want you to think of Macro as a first response if you see someone in need, and if need be, the teams can coordinate a higher level of response for mental health resources or if need be, an ambulance. The ways that you can reach Macro, there's 3 primary ways. 1, you can call 911, but we would prefer you not to. But our whole lives, we've been trained to call 911, so if you do it, a police dispatcher will answer, they'll triage your call and send it to the fire department to send to a Macro team. The second way is the Macro direct phone number. Does everybody have their pen out or their phone? Because I'll say this about 7 times. The phone number is 510-44-MACRO. 510-44-MACRO. If you need the numbers, 510-446-2276. 510-446-2276. That'll take you directly to our fire dispatch center. You will listen to an auto attendant, because I must remind, Macro calls are non-emergent. If it's emergent, hang up and call 911, but they should be non-emergent, non-violent, and non-criminal in nature. So you'll go through the auto attendant, you'll make a couple selections, you will get a fire dispatcher who will send it to a Macro crew to respond. The final way to reach Macro is by email. You can email us at, everybody ready? macro@oaklandca.gov. macro@oaklandca.gov. This has the advantage of going straight to our teams. It lets us keep a record of interaction, and if you're dealing with an ongoing difficult issue, it allows us to keep a history of it and engage other departments if necessary. Finally, before I jump off and give it back to Brooklyn, let me just give you a quick update of what your teams have been doing. In June, we were able to put in service a new batch of responders, bringing our whole staff to 27 strong. This allows us to cover the city of Oakland 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, or 15 hours a day, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Sunday. And that's a big achievement. But what it's really meant on the stat sheet is in the last 3 months, today is the last day of the quarter of Q3 of 2024. The year has gone by extremely fast. But in the last 3 months, we have already responded to 1,130 calls for service for Oakland residents. This is a high watermark for our program, and we only expect it to get bigger and more that we can do, the more that we have experience in the field. But continue to reach out, continue to request support. Macro crews are happy to help. And just one show of hands, has anybody in the room actually called for Macro support? Thank you, Mary. I knew you were going to answer. Councilmember Cal, appreciate you. We are here to serve, and if you see the teams in the street, if you see the van, wave them down, give them some love. They need it. This is tough work. And do the same thing for our officers and our firefighters and any first responder you see out there. They're dealing with people at their worst. It's often consent, but a little bit of compassion, a little bit of love, a little bit of empathy, it can go a long way. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Elliot Jones. Okay, so this question is, this person is specifically asking, if they call macro, does that mean the police won't come? It sounds like they don't want a police response, so is it guaranteed there won't be a police response? How is that negotiated with dispatch or your folks, your staff?
Thank you for this question. It's important, but it's also a broader discussional topic. We have to be very intentional with our language. If you call any of the services and you say the wrong thing, he has a weapon or anything of that nature, it will dictate a different response. What we ask you to do is be as calm, as cool, as clear as you can be when communicating the issue, because if we have all the details, it best ensures that the right team responds, whether it be macro, whether it be the fire department, whether it be an ambulance or behavioral health services, and if it reaches that level, the police. If we're all doing our job, we are all going to be making an impact, and things are not going to fall unduly on the plate of OPD. They can focus on the violent crimes. Similarly, our firefighters can stay in the house and be ready for emergencies. So just be intentional with your language. But if you get through the dispatch system and you get a dispatcher on the phone to request macro, in all likelihood, police response will not be coming as well.
Okay, great. A couple more questions, and I'm gonna need you to land it real quickly because we gotta keep moving, but these are really important, and macro's a new service, and so there's a lot of questions, good questions. So can you just kind of talk through what do people do when they arrive on the scene? Like, what is macro's actual process as quickly as you can? What can people expect from the service?
Quickly, eh? All right.
You have 30 seconds, sir.
Jeez. So when a macro team arrives, a little bit what will happen in the rig is that they're going to take some time to assess the situation. It truly has to be non-violent, non-criminal in nature. Just because somebody's yelling erratically or maybe even having a stick or something, it doesn't mean that a team will not engage, but they have to make sure it's safe. Once they do engage, they try to develop a connection with somebody. Hey, how you doing? I'm Elliot. I'm here with the macro team. It looks like you could use some help. Every macro interaction is optional. We usually operate on a 3 F off rule. If you tell us 3 times in the interaction to F off, we'll come back and see you a little bit later. But the reality is that we give them a choice, because if they are likely to accept services, whether it be water and a blanket or a connection to something greater, if they willingly take it, it has a lot more chance of imprinting on their mind a positive interaction, but also that the service or whatever they're trying to get will stick.
All right, so this is a really quick one. You can clap it up for that. I think someone wanted to. This was something that the Oakland community and residents fought for, and I'm really grateful to Elliot Jones, for our first manager, to put it all together for us. If you see a person in crisis and on the street, should you call macro or the Alameda County Crisis Prevention?
See, while I want you to use your best thought, it would be best to call us first so that we can put eyes on it. Sometimes it's not as easy to get the behavioral health teams. If somebody is clearly in crisis, yes, you can do that. But unless you're a trained clinician, you may not be able to assess. And just because you're having a bad day or you're desperate, it doesn't usually rise to the level of a clinician. A macro team can come there, assess, this person hasn't had water, they haven't had food, let's bring the temperature down and figure out what they need. If they are still beyond that point, we can make the correct call. But we all have a role. You can try them both, but I would say call macro, and then we'll take it from there.
All right, great. And then,
Brooklyn, can I just add to that?
Please, Chief.
If you have any question about anything, just call macro. Or just call us, and we'll get out there and we can put a more professional eye on it. And if the additional resources are needed, we'll call for additional resources. So I don't want you guys to feel like you have to, should I call? Just call. Just call. Get us there, ring the bell, get some resources on scene, and then we can assess if we need additional resources from there.
Thank you, Chief. All right, this one, this one, I have two for you, Chief, that are not related to macro. I'm gonna be quick about it. Does macro have the same approach with working with young people versus adults?
We traditionally we don't work with juveniles. We do come across them, and the approach is the same. It's about trying to build trust, understand where people are at, and then make the appropriate connection to resources. Young people, it's more difficult usually, and we do not typically respond to inside the schools. But when we have worked with young people in the past, we take the same approach with anybody else. Develop rapport, try to offer any connection to service and see what their needs really are.
And when you say young people that you don't work with, are you talking about minors specifically? Because I know when we talk about youth, we can go all the way up to 25 years old.
Yes, we have not traditionally worked with minors. We have come across them in just our daily duties, but it hasn't been a core focus, and we've been able to respond to those issues.
Great. Does 211 direct you to macro if necessary?
Not yet, but I will say there are meetings going on about redesigning the online reporting system for non-criminal reports and requests for services. So I'm looking forward to being a part of those conversations and finding more ways for you all to get to macro when you need it.
All right. Thank you so much, Elliot. Okay, Chief Covington, what's being done to address some of the dead trees behind the zoo in Nolan Park? This person has property around that area or lives around that area and is worried about the fire risk.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Hopefully you've noticed that we've been up on our Grass Valley and Skyline corridor quite a bit, cutting the canvas back. We have October 18th, you'll see crews out really cutting the canopy back. We realize that is kind of a choke point for our citizens that live in that area. If in the event there was a wildland fire, we don't want anyone to be trapped. Those are ingress and egress routes, so we're making sure we clear our routes so that in the event of a wildland fire, we can get our citizens out. So you'll notice by the end of October, a drastic cutting back of those dead and dying eucalyptus and the canopy through the Grass Valley and Skyline corridors. And we're working on, hopefully you guys have heard about Measure MM. That's another measure that we're hoping to get passed to do extraordinary work throughout our entire city.
Thank you, Chief Cov. This last question for you before we move into Public Works and Department of Transportation is about the other functions of the fire department. So we have macro, and that kind of covers some of the work that's done to address or to serve unhoused folks in encampments. But they're asking about what else does the fire department do when it comes to blighted houses, unhoused encampments, and code enforcement. So if there's a particular bureau that covers those things, or how does the fire department address those issues?
Yeah, for the code enforcement piece, that would be our Fire Prevention Bureau. Fire Marshal Felicia Bryant is the head of that. They do residential inspections. We do over 30,000 residential inspections annually. Our fire crews also do commercial inspections. So I know in the last few town halls we've talked about people say, oh my goodness, people are showing up at my door, at my business, and they're coming in and they're looking around, and then I get a bill. That's correct. We have to do annual commercial inspections, and part of that inspection is we're charging people for that inspection annually. But it's an opportunity for you to make sure that your building is fire safe for yourself and your employees, and it's also an opportunity for us to see this building under non-emergent situations. So I know it's an inconvenience to be charged, but it really is our attempt as a city to be as fire safe as we possibly can be, especially post-Ghost Ship, where we have buildings in our cities that have not been commercially inspected, and that's on the fire department to make sure that that happens.
And anything you can speak to about encampment services, or how does the fire department engage with encampments?
We are involved in encampment services quite a bit. We've teamed up with the Department of Transportation, Public Works, to clean up as many of the encampments as we can. Obviously, the fire department is not the enforcement arm of the city, but when things are outside of the fire code and people are tapping into power lines and doing things that are unsafe that could get them hurt and the community hurt, we have to step in. So we are a partner with we are in collaboration with the other departments throughout the city, specifically with our encampment team, to help in any way we can.
All right, thank you so much, Chief Covington. We are going to move to the clean portion of the evening's agenda, and I'm going to start by introducing our city administrator, Mr. Justin D. Johnson. Justin Johnson came to Oakland in May 2023 after an exhaustive nationwide search for our next city administrator. He has worked in municipal and county governments for nearly 2 decades, including serving as the Deputy Chief Operating Officer in Atlanta, where he worked closely with public safety agencies and led development of significant capital projects. He also previously served as the Assistant County Manager for the Unified Government of Athens, Clarke County, Georgia, as City Manager of Bisbee, Arizona, and as a Management Assistant to the City Manager for the City of Tucson, Arizona. Before this role, he served as IBM's Corporate Social Responsibility Manager. Please give a warm welcome to Justin D. Johnson, our City Administrator. And I do want to do a time check at 7:04. We're doing pretty good. He brought the rest of his team with you to talk. We have lots of questions about public works and transportation, so thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you, and my apologies for being late. I certainly want to start out and acknowledge, Carol, thank you. You and a number of practitioners came and prayed and blessed over the office, and so you represent the community well, so thank you for doing that. As mentioned, just wanted to just take a minute and acknowledge, and say thank you, to everyone that's here this evening. Certainly want to just say I have the pleasure of serving as a city administrator, working very closely with all the departments in the city, and I had a hand in selecting almost everybody, on this stage, and so I think there's a phenomenal all-star team here, and certainly looking forward to their continued partnership and leadership going forward. One of the things I also wanted to just state, I also had the pleasure of bringing over into my office Assistant City Administrator Duffy, who was formerly Public Works Director, and so he'll share a little bit about his background and experiences. One of the main reasons was because I wanted to make sure that I have appropriate alignment within the various portfolios of the Assistant City Administrators, which I have 3 Assistant City Administrators and 2 deputies. And so the assistants have their own portfolio departments and responsibilities, and they're based on key themes. And so when we talk about the clean and safe, and that's where Administrator Duffy will certainly lean in and share a little bit more about his experiences and responsibilities and certainly expectations. And so we are also leaning very heavily on many of our capital projects in the area of transportation, and so Director Rowan will talk a little bit about that. But I wanted to make sure I preserve enough time so that we can answer as many questions more appropriately, as opposed to you all having to hear me talk. So at this time, I will turn the mic over to Duffy, and we can go from there.
Thank you, sir. Now, how did that make you feel?
Terrible.
Okay. Every year, 20,000 tons of trash is literally dumped in our streets. And so you should be equally as mad about that happening and people trashing Oakland streets. It's disrespectful, and it's not who we are. And so I did that because I knew I would get a reaction out of you guys. One of my portfolios is illegal dumping, homeless encampments. The other is vertical and horizontal infrastructure. So I work with Josh and Public Works Department to help build every new community center, library, maintain parks, and so on and so on. So once again, every year I have 28 employees in the Public Works Department that are paid for by you, that are actually out there every day, and they collected 20,000 tons of trash off our streets. Now, what that really means is that is about 35 pounds for each resident of Oakland that we're carrying around physically and mentally as we see on our streets. And you are doing your part because you have called Oakland 1 about 30,000 times a year reporting the information. Unfortunately, there's so much stuff going down and we're picking it up. So much stuff going down and we're picking it up. The real issue is, how do we stop the people from putting it down? So, how many people in here actually have trash service? Trash service, trash service.
Service.
Trash service, yes. You know what? You all have it. And if you don't have it, guess what happens? The city will sign you up for this service and charge you more. That's what happens to every resident in the city of Oakland. Now, If I ask the same question in the business community, I would get probably 85% of those businesses that we have in the city actually have trash service. But you know, those 15% of the businesses, they still generate trash. But part of that trash is we're seeing on our city streets. So we're going to hold them accountable too, moving forward in the future, to ensure that everybody, every business and every resident, and what the law says is this. The law says that every occupied premise in the city of Oakland must have trash service. And that's what part of our enforcement program, where we're going to ensure that that continuously happens. And so you guys probably also heard about the mayor's executive order that was recently issued regarding homeless encampments. What the mayor is basically saying is she's reminding all departments that in addition to the encampment management policy, you have a responsibility to enforce all of our city laws. Because you are unhoused does not mean, so it's not a crime to be unhoused, but it doesn't give you an excuse to break the law. If you have an abandoned car that's 6 months past registration, if you and I had that, it get ticketed, towed, booted. But I can't tell you how many times I've run across where there's an abandoned vehicle and it's got 8, 9 tickets on it. Couldn't happen with you and I because we have a job, because we have a house, we get penalized for that. No, we're going to start holding everybody accountable. And that's part of the mayor's executive order. We're just going to prioritize ADA compliance, removal of homeless encampments in parks, and we're going to immediately, and someone asked the question earlier, of Chief Covington and also Chief Mitchell have become very, very valuable partners that I've been able to work with. And I'll tell you one story about Chief Mitchell. I went to meet him one day at his office, and he had at the PAB, and he had 3 or 4 people in uniform, and I walked in there, and I was a little bit intimidated. And he said to me, Duffy, why don't I get a chance to determine where we're cleaning up these sites? And I had a big smile on my face. I said, Chief, you just let me know, and we're there. Because Chief Mitchell does 2 things. When you see OPD out at the site, they are protecting our employees, and they're also enforcing the laws. So when we go to an encampment, when my employees go to an encampment and they are engaged in removing encampment, ideally when we get there, note this, when we start an encampment program, before we remove anybody from an encampment, we always lead first with outreach, and we offer housing. So we go out a week or 2 weeks in advance, and we identify who you are. We try to get you any services that you're entitled to. For example, if you're a veteran, you're entitled to veteran services. If you're disabled, you're entitled to those services. We go out and we ask you, before we shut down the encampment, we post a big notice all over the encampment. In 7 days, in 10 days, we're going to close this site. And then we go out and we talk to each individual, and we ask them who you are, what's going on, do you qualify, how can we help? And they say to us, no thank you, because they believe that we're not going to show up and we're not going to close the encampment. But when we post the notice and we go out and we do the outreach and we offer housing and we show up to close the encampment, then they understand how serious we really are. But what happens there is, when we are closing an encampment, people who are still there, they are re-traumatized by us closing the encampment. Ideally, so when you see these advocates that are saying, we're being bad, whatever, note that we've been there for 2 weeks offering services, offering help. The city has continued to say, we will lead with compassion, but we will also lead to remove encampments to make sure that we restore open space to all of the public to have access. That's the mayor said to me very clearly. I want you to have access to parks, access to schools, make sure that kids have a clean path to go to school. Those are her requirements in the executive order. I encourage you guys to all read that. But going back to another question, what can you do to help?
I was this close to doing it. It's just bothering me. It's just bothering me. I wanted to go get it so bad. Elliot, Elliot.
Ellie's volunteering to help. Okay? Now, in the back, look at the back room. There's our Adopt a Spot people. In the back room, there we go. They're raising their hands. If you have an area of the city that you want to help clean up, you can join up with the Adopt a Spot program. We have over 1,200 spots that are adopted throughout the city of Oakland. It's one way for you to partner. Another way for you another way for you to do this. If you see somebody with a truck and wood boards on the side, and they say they'll haul away your trash, note that they haul away your trash, and they got a great deal on the price. They're taking your trash and they're dumping it on the streets. So please don't hire them unless you do this. Make sure you don't pay them till you get the dump slip back. Because ultimately, our enforcement crews will go through that trash and they will find your mail, your address, and they'll come back to you and say, hey, your stuff's been illegally dumped. So please, if you have bulky item collection materials, call Waste Management. You already pay for it. You get one free bulky item collection every year. If you don't want to do that, you can drive down to the street dump. You can show your address through an ID or utility bill, and you can dump there for free at no cost at all to you. Once a year, you can do that. Single family and or multi-family units. Any City of Oakland resident can drive to the Davis Street dump and dump, show your ID that you live in the city, and it's free, no cost at all. The other thing that we're doing too, I'm almost done, is that we are doing programs called Oakland Fresh, where we're going through and we're identifying certain areas of the city, and we're going in, we're cleaning up the entire area, from removing graffiti, from sweeping the streets, and kind of doing a refresh of the entire neighborhood. So please, I'll be available after if you have any questions, but I want you to know that the mayor's executive order on homeless encampment removal, you should be seeing dramatic improvements over the next 6 months in how we manage and handle our encampment management in the city of Oakland. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go straight into the presentation by our DOT director, Josh Rowan.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Josh Rowan. I don't have anything to throw on the floor. I wish I'd brought a shovel full of asphalt or something, something exciting to look at. So, real quick, I'm actually going to jump to the questions because I've gotten the same question 5 times in a row. It's really 2 questions. So I've gotten the second question a 6th time, and I'm betting the other question will show up. So question 1 is always, how did the roads get so bad? And if you look at your handout, there are some numbers, a lot of numbers. I'm a Georgia Tech nerd, but let's decipher some numbers. If you look at 2008 to 2018, I've shown you 100 miles paved in 10 years. Oakland has 800 miles. That equates to your street being paved once every 80 years. So if you're an average human being like me, if you ever saw your street get paved, the odds were you would never see it again. Coming to the last 6 years, because the paving has been funded, as you can see in FY24, under this administration, we hit 47 miles, which is significant for us. So essentially in 1 year, we did what used to take 5 years. So while we haven't done the whole city, there's a lot remaining to be done. We're probably about 30% complete. So as you drive around, you see a lot of the busier streets have been paved. We're just now starting to get more into the neighborhoods. I would also draw your attention to, everybody has a pothole. It's like a pet rock. They name their potholes. So from 2008 to 2018, 81,000 were repaired. Last year, we repaired 53,000. So the team is performing at an amazing level. If we flip to the next slide that I gave you, I put some numbers up that I'm not even going to talk about. Let's talk sideshows. It's amazingly horrible behavior. I am committed to partnering with my friends in OPD because what I believe is once they arrive and take over an intersection, it's too late. Historically, the position of a traffic engineer was, well, we didn't learn about this. There's nothing in our manuals. We're too afraid. And Mayor Thao basically said, enough of that. Develop a solution, and that's what we're working on. If you get out, we're actually doing 2 experiments that are live and running right now. One is at Foothills and Seminary. The other one is at Skyline and Redwood. 2 totally different approaches, but you can see what we're trying to do, how we're trying to change either the geometry of an intersection or the surface of the street. We have a design that we think can really interfere with the behavior. Fortunately, we did a test build in our own maintenance yard because it didn't work. So we've tweaked the design. We actually met today, and we're going to go out next week and build it again. And our whole idea is to start, right now we're able to interfere in about 1 intersection per month, which is incredibly slow. We think if we can hit somewhere between 20 to 30 per year, we can just slowly start taking intersections out of play in Oakland. And we believe that if we become just more difficult to deal with, that it just becomes less fun. And so that's our approach. And then hopefully we start relieving some of the burden that's placed upon the police department because again, please don't tell my wife, I've actually attended a few, and it really does get out of control fast. And it just, once it's happening, there's no way to gain control. And so we want to prevent it. And it's going to happen through an engineering approach. And so that's my presentation for you tonight.
All right, thank you. I really want to know what you wore to the sideshow, Josh, but that's a whole nother conversation. Thank you for addressing the sideshow question. That was definitely here. Also the pothole question, and why did it get this bad, and how did it get this bad? Lots of questions about safety for disabled and our elderly residents and neighbors. So what's being done to make sure that Oakland is in compliance with ADA access to sidewalks? And yeah.
That's an excellent question. So the other part that goes with our paving program is that's actually the catalyst for most of our safety initiatives. We are currently in the process of negotiating a settlement to the city's class action ADA lawsuit, which will put us on a path to bringing the city to be ADA compliant. This is a road I've traveled before. In my previous job in Atlanta, we did the exact same thing. From a safety perspective, we like to say that lives saved is better than miles paved. We understand we have to do the maintenance, but we do have some very dangerous streets, and so we are well on our way, as you can see from some of the numbers, with upgrading our ADA ramps. There's a lot of sidewalk work that remains to be done, but this is going to be a long-term thing that we're going to have to address. But when you look at the streets in Oakland, what we like to say is if you get it right for the 8-year-olds, and if you get it right for the 80-year-olds, the rest of us in between, we're going to be okay.
All right, thank you so much. Sort of related, so the installation of posts along Telegraph, this person is asking why those were installed and feels like they're an impediment for folks who are disabled.
The white bollards that are...
Yes, sounds like yes. Yes. Yeah, I think is it related to the bike lanes? Oh, thank you for your service.
So how in the heck do you expect people with disabilities to get around? Thank you. And since I sit on the board, I know what you guys are doing. You're putting all these bicycles where people can park. Telegraphs is a mess. And how do you think these doggone people with disabilities going to get on the bus if they got to get in the middle of the street to get on the bus so they can get hit? So, so all this stuff is a mess. It's filthy in Oakland. I'm sick of it. 75 years old, I've been going
All right, can we give her a round for her service on one of our commissions? It's a volunteer position. She sounds very engaged.
So,
Josh, I know you just got here, but you have a lot of questions that she just asked.
No, there are two sides of this. This probably warrants a separate discussion. Sure. But because we've actually conflated two issues. The center running bus is international. It's not on Telegraph. But the issue on Telegraph is, well, not necessarily. Because, again, we can have a separate conversation, but an undivided 4-lane highway is the most dangerous section of highway a city can have. A 3-lane section nationally will see a 30 to 40% reduction in crashes, which means it's safer for pedestrians, it's safer for cars, it's safer for all users. It's a shorter distance to cross, it prevents left-hand turning crashes, and it is a better operational model in the intersections.
All right, thank you. And I would just encourage you, Josh will be here as well as some of our other leaders afterwards if you want to approach and have a more nuanced conversation. I think, Josh, if folks do have recommendations or feedback, obviously she's on one of our commissions, so she doesn't need to know how to plug into the city. But for other people who have suggestions, questions, recommendations, critiques, how do they engage with the Department of Transportation?
Just reach out to me. Start with me, and we'll hook them up with the appropriate folks.
All right, and there is a reason why we're all here in person, so that folks can approach afterwards, especially if you have very specific questions about your specific street or your specific block, neighborhood. Okay, I think we've gone through, you just addressed a lot of them. We did the sideshows. Oh, can you talk about the difference between the poles that are, or the pylons or whatever they are on the street and the ones that are in front of businesses? Because that's also come up, like why are these poles coming up in front of businesses? I know what they are, but you answer.
The bollards.
Yes, thank you.
So one of the things that we're looking at is the City of Oakland code is very generic when it comes to what businesses and what things can be installed within the right-of-way. So typically, for example, a business wants to put bollards in front of itself to harden its physical infrastructure. That is a minor encroachment permit, which is actually fairly difficult and an exhaustive process to get. So we are working to change city code to make that a simpler process. We've also worked with restaurants to change things like the outdoor dining permit. It's a very onerous process, and we're getting a lot of complaints and a lot of demand to start breaking out specific items to make it simpler to use the right-of-way for more constructive purposes. And we hear those messages, and that we have a team that's focused on just making the permitting process much simpler than it is today.
All right, I have a couple more for you. So this one is about parking violations and folks feeling like those are not being issued for people who are violating parking parking laws. And so is that Department of Transportation? Who enforces that, and what's the status of that?
We wrote 260,000 tickets last year. We've written 60,000 in the first 2 months of this fiscal year, $18 million in fines. So, I'd love to double the team and hit 40 million in fines. Back to the comment about the posts, they're up because everybody in the city parks illegally. So there's a lot of need on parking enforcement. We have 60 people who do that work, and so we hit what we can, but I don't think many people know we exceeded 250,000 citations.
Thank you. One more for you. Stolen vehicles, burned out vehicles, abandoned vehicles. What is the city doing to address that? And is that your transportation?
That's all.
Your department?
Yes, it is. So that's all within Oakland DOT, and there's a troubling trend in there. Two trends actually. We get about 400 requests per week for abandoned auto removal. Right now, we have the capability to remove 100. 3 years ago, the request level was 200. So we've seen a doubling in 2 years. The other trend that we're seeing is an increase in the amount of stolen vehicles. So it's gone from about 25 up to 44%. So with current capacity, we're removing anywhere from 3,500 to 4,500 vehicles per year. And so the demand far exceeds our capacity to respond. So we're in a triage mode where we hit the highest risk ones first, and then we back up. The stolen ones are becoming problematic just because of some of the reporting requirements that go with those.
And I think CHP is helping us to identify those stolen vehicles as well and helping them to get off the streets. Just wanted to mention that. I know I said last time, but I'm gonna say it again.
Sure.
If someone wants a stop sign or a light installed at an intersection that they think is dangerous, how do they approach the city about that?
So that's actually two separate issues. One, a traffic signal will have to go through a warrant analysis, and because of the work that's involved, if it doesn't meet the warrant, we very likely will not entertain installing it. There is a lot of heartburn right now in the City of Oakland about stop signs. I think there is a need in many areas to look at converting two-way stops to all-way stops. One of the things that we're talking about is we are able to use our engineering judgment to create all-way stops even if they don't meet the warrant. So those are some areas that you're going to see changes going forward. It's been a very by-the-book kind of approach to stop signs, that if it doesn't meet the warrant, we don't do it. But there are areas that I think do need that type of treatment.
All right, thank you so much, Director Rowan. We really appreciate you. We're going to move into some questions around the encampments and illegal dumping. And I just want to do a time check. We're at 7:29. We're going to go maybe 10 minutes of questions and before we wrap up and give some calls to action and some gratitude. So thank you all for hanging with us. We have a few for you. I think the majority of these questions are definitely about addressing encampments. And, you know, we are a compassionate city, and folks really want to hear about how folks are being offered shelter. And then specifically what happens if they turn it down. So we know that it's being offered, you've clarified that. We know that you are giving notice, right? So folks are saying, like, if you put up the sign, is there any kind of verbal communication with folks who might not see the sign? What is the level of engagement beforehand? And then the second question is, if they decide that they don't want to take services or shelter, do we know what happens to them?
So, first of all, we put the signs up in the encampment, and then we send out trained clinicians that go in and try to interface with every individual at the encampment, doing a census. And the primary goal is to ensure that they get registered in the federal homeless, it's called HMS system, so they can get paired in for services. The important component is our goal is to make connection with people that are in these encampments, provide them with any resources that they qualify for, give them an opportunity to get temporary shelter. And then from temporary shelter, what they do is they fill out a housing plan. And then that actually helps them qualify and get into the $200 million in housing that the mayor talked about that we're building. So the opposite of that is they stay on the street. And they stay on the street. And they just survive on the street. By us giving them an opportunity to get temporary shelter, they have an opportunity to move forward and get into permanent affordable housing. So if anybody tells you that we're doing sweeps and we don't offer services, they're lying. Absolutely, unequivocally lying. That's not how we do the process. Everyone in every encampment before we close is offered shelter. And here's the thing, not only are they offered shelter, City of Oakland has multiple types of shelter. We provide tiny homes, we provide little condo units, we provide mobile home safe RV parking, and we provide congregate shelter. We have people who also, if they're disabled, they can qualify for a quicker and immediate access through the county's program. And so we provide multiple avenues for everyone, for every encampment that we service. Now, when they say no, they don't want the shelter, I understand that. And I say this, we've posted, we've given you 7-10 days notice. We're closing down this encampment. We've offered you an opportunity for housing, but you cannot stay here.
Thank you, Director. I want to ask, do you get feedback or do we know why folks are refusing shelter? I know the mayor's talked a lot about how her experience with homelessness didn't drive her to try to pitch a tent. So is there any data, or do we know why people would prefer to stay in the tent than take shelter?
Well, sometimes, when you are, my experience in doing this for a number of years has been, there are different types of people that find themselves unhoused. There are some people that are mentally, or they have drug addiction, and there are some people who are, they find themselves in a bad circumstance. I just recently learned that there are some people, when they know of an encampment being closed, there are some people who are unhoused, and they will move to that encampment just to get the services. And that's unique for me. And that's somebody who we want to help, who says, I know you're closing this encampment down. I want to be here so I can get the offer of service and I can move forward. Those are the people who are trying to be housed. Other people who don't want to live by rules in a shelter, they want to be out on their own. And so there's multiple reasons, and I'm not trying to explain or simplify this. I don't have the idea in terms of the different psychics that are involved in this. But there are people who really want to be housed. And that's why we make the offer to everyone.
Thank you.
I just want to add.
I was going to ask you to add something. Can I give you a framing for it? Because I know you're going to add, but I think I want to make sure we're covering the folks' questions at the same time. So folks are talking about, a humane approach to this issue and acknowledging the high cost of living, right, and the lack of affordable housing. So if you can reiterate, I know you talked about that in the beginning of your presentation, but some folks filed in. What's the strategy around affordable housing? Because obviously that's an issue.
Yes, and so we have already pushed forward with our affordable housing that are already in the pipeline. For years, we had these pipeline affordable housing units that didn't pencil out for developers, but because of the cost of materials today, it actually isn't sexy or cost effective to actually build out market rate anymore. Right now, this is the time for affordable, deeply affordable housing. And so not only are we preserving our affordable housing stock, but again, we are investing Measure U dollars, which is over $200 million, into building out new, affordable, and deeply affordable housing. With that being said, in regards to, and I want to level set, and I will agree with you that this is going to be a little bit of whack-a-mole until the federal government takes serious this housing crisis. And not just that, but let's remind ourselves that during the Reagan administration, they took away all of the mental health facilities. They took away all the rehab facilities. And so without those facilities being put in place, it will be whack-a-mole for that marginalized population, because they're going to need more support than just going to a shelter. And so understanding that, we continuously, I specifically will go to the federal government to actually lobby for this. And to no surprise at all, when we're at the federal government, they have professional lobbyists for multiple different topics. Housing is not one of them. And so what that tells me is that at the federal level, they don't see housing as a national crisis because they're not taking it seriously enough. And so we have to do our due diligence to work across the aisle and go to different states that are redder and make sure that the people that live there understand that they need to demand their representative to really take this affordable housing crisis seriously, because every single city across the nation is going through this, one version or another. And until we get those federal dollars to build out the mental health facilities and the rehab facilities, it will be a little bit like whack-a-mole, but at the same time, we're going to capture as many people as we can to get them into shelter. And of course, that is a process, and if they stay in that process, they eventually will be housed. But of course, I think that there's just so many different steps and so many arms of the government that has to work in order for us to really solve this crisis.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Brooklyn, if I could just add to that.
Make it brief, but thank you. Yes, real quick.
Also to remember, we recently closed down the MLK encampment. You guys probably saw that, you're familiar with that. And so what happened in that particular point is, I have to remind you, because we talk about shelter and compassion. So what happens with the homeless encampments are we're seeing criminal elements hiding within the homeless encampments. We're seeing chop shops, we're seeing human trafficking, and we're seeing homicides and murders that are occurring in those particular areas. So it's important for us to be able to address those issues so the unhoused are not being taken advantage of. Also, too, what's very important is this isn't just our fight, okay? Now, how many people here know who their board of supervisors are?
The county.
It's the county board of supervisors' problem too. The City of Oakland, out of all the unhoused, the beds in the city for unhoused individuals, the City of Oakland has 29% of the population, but yet, of the county population, but yet we have 58% of the housing for the homeless in our city. We're doing more than our part, but so the homeless crisis should be an Alameda County issue and not just the City of Oakland issue.
Thank you.
And if I could, just one last thing. This is the critical part. We need all of everybody to organize, because we, the city, we don't have a public health department. So therefore, we cannot draw down state funding and federal funding for public health or social services. That is the county's job. And this is my challenge to them, is that, great, you're giving us the funding in an equal way according to our population size, but are you giving it to us equitably? Right? If we are hosting the majority of the unhoused programs in the City of Oakland, then we need to see the majority of that funding, because we can't continue to operate as if we have a social services department, right? We did that work during COVID because we were able to go to FEMA to get reimbursements. That is done and gone with. And so we have to right size and demand for the county to really delineate what their responsibilities are and what they should pay for, and what services they need to bring to the City of Oakland, and what we can offer. What I can tell you what we can offer is building out the affordable housing, the infrastructure piece, renting out the land for $1 if the county is going to service it. But we can't move forward with solutions if the county doesn't agree with us to service it. And I can tell you, and I don't care which supervisor here is, it's the truth, they are moving really slow. And so what that does is that you can see that they're standing up, their operations in the City of Oakland. But what about Fremont? What about Hayward? What about Dublin? What about Piedmont? Now, if every city had opened up a shelter or a safe parking lot, or build out affordable housing, the very basic, because some of these cities don't even want to build affordable housing, then we would actually have less of that burden. And so the burden falls upon Oakland because we are compassionate, but that compassion is going to end real quick, in the sense that we're going to start demanding for the elected officials at the Board of Soups to do their due diligence and their job. You see, their meetings are during the daytime. Our meetings are in the evening. Right? Not a lot of people know who your board of supervisors are. And so we have to be out here to educate you so that you can go out and organize to demand your board of supervisor to do better.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to, let's clap it up for that. Just to clarify, there's a couple other questions that came in. So, shelter is offered. Are there mental health professionals who go into the encampments when those services are offered?
Yes, so there are trained clinicians that go out to the sites, and if they determine that mental health is needed, they can call county resources to try to bring them in. Also, too, we work very closely with Macro, and Macro does also visit those sites.
Okay, great. All right, I would be remiss if we didn't get to some illegal dumping, because there are several questions, but I'm trying to cluster them and cover as much ground as we can. So one of the questions is about the bulky pickup. And so some folks are saying that, is it true that only single family homes get bulky pickup, or do apartments and each unit in that apartment get a free bulky item pickup?
So it used to be that only single family residents would get that service. And then if you were living in an apartment, you had to check with the landlord. But in November of 2022, that changed. And every single resident, multifamily or single unit, can call and get service directly through Waste Management. So if you live in an apartment or a condo, you just call Waste Management, give them your address, put your bulky item material out in the front, and they'll come by and collect it.
All right, thank you. This next question was related. It's saying we should make it cheaper to dump mattresses and box springs. Can those items be a part of the bulky pickup?
They are part of the
Free-
bulky item
free
collection.
bulky pickup.
Absolutely. So what you really want to do is you want to call to get the service appointment before you put the stuff out on the street.
All right, and so this question is a good question, Mayor, really quickly, Mayor.
Really quickly.
Oh, it's not on. Oh, sorry, we're
All right,
gonna,
really quickly. I would encourage everyone to have a bulky block party. So you can tap your neighbors and say, hey, let's all do the bulky pickup, because you're only allowed a certain square footage. But if you all do it, it'll be fun, and it's a great way to actually build community.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is, will the flock cameras be addressing illegal dumping?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, yeah, let's keep it quick. Thank you. That was the quickest answer of the night. I really appreciate it. And for the same reason, because they can pick up on license plates and special marks on the cars, et cetera. This question, how can we dump dirt or concrete, those items that Waste Management on Davis Street won't pick up?
So the city does have a non-exclusive franchise agreement. You can get on the city's webpage, but this is part of where you actually hire someone to remove that material for you. So it's not a part of your regular trash service. If you're doing construction and demolition, you would call one of those concrete asphalt companies. You can get on our website, you can look in the yellow pages. They are non-exclusive franchise agreements, about 35 of them that we have in the city that can provide you that service.
Okay, great. So this question is, why doesn't, or is it possible, so it says some large cities have this service, why can't we contract out with a company to clean up the trash? Has the city considered that? Is there a company available, or have we ever explored having a private outside organization be contracted to pick up trash on the streets? I think dumping, not like...
So I think what someone's referencing is, and we do actually have a contract with the Beautification Council that we send out to certain areas, and they'll help us with more sprucing up after picking up litter and legal dumping. But the primary amount of legal dumping is picked up by your city employees. It's about 58 of those employees that are going out. As I said earlier, they collect about 20,000 tons of material last year.
Okay, thank you so much. This last question is related to encampments, and this question is, can some of the vacant warehouses be updated or renovated to house the homeless while affordable housing is being built?
So a lot of the warehouses are privately owned, and so we can work with folks, but we do need that investment, that money, right? The resources in order to revamp everything. Of course, we have to be up to fire code, and so with that being said, we have the properties. We're working and we're looking for private properties where we can stand up, the RV shelters, the safe car parking zone. We're working with a lot of faith-based institutions with their property to build out affordable housing. Right now, with the way that we can streamline affordable housing, we're working closely with our faith-based institutions, which we have the most west of the Mississippi here in Oakland. And so that work is happening, and that is being stood up pretty quickly so that, they can have their parishioners actually be housed in these affordable units. We do not want to lose our Oakland population, so we're moving expeditiously.
All right. Okay. So thank you. You can clap that up if you want. I just want to acknowledge that we have a number of questions that are very specific and nuanced that we will be picking up via email. So again, if you were live streaming on the chat with questions, please enter your email address into the chat so we can make sure and capture those. Your questions are very specific, home buyers program, stuff like that. And so we want to be able to answer those questions even if they didn't fall into one of our buckets here. And so the last question, very general, before we get into some calls of action, is there's been at least 3 questions, one related to churches, one related to community, is what can our faith-based community do to support the city and getting on track? And relatedly, what maybe can other folks do who are maybe not associated with a religious institution?
Yes, absolutely. So what we're trying to start here is a culture of change, right? We got to teach our young people, this is where we live. We should respect it. And so the way that we're doing this is through Oakland Fresh. We are bringing out our team to, make sure that your sidewalks are ADA accessible, the streets are paved, the crosswalks are painted and what have you. While we're doing that and we're picking up trash, I invite the community to come out with us and do this work together in community so that we are holding ourselves accountable and holding our neighbors accountable, and so that we can also understand better how government works in the sense that, yes, the county has a role in this, yes, local government here has a role in in this. And all of this is done through community, and we'll just be safer for all of that. But I do think that, the community has the solutions to the many problems that we have. So we welcome any ideas. Please send them our way. We're looking for new ideas every single day around all kinds of topics.
All right, thank you so much, Mayor, and we want to thank you all for being here. As we close out, there's a couple of calls to action the Mayor just talked about, and I think Mr. Duffy talked about the Adopt-A Spot. So that's not just the city kind of helping lend tools to you to clean up your block, it's also that they will come and do an initial cleaning. And so then the commitment and the partnership is just to keep it up. And so those resources and materials are in the back to be able to sign up for. The other thing we're asking folks to do is sign up for AC alerts. It's really important in case of an emergency that you get the right alerts straight to your phone so you know what's going on and what to do. And then finally, we just want to make sure again that we have your email address. We did go through over 20 questions, but we obviously still have more. And I think the directors and chiefs on the stage can attest to the fact that Eden is pretty aggressive about getting those answers from you all, and that will be going out. So even if you asked a question that was very specific, we're going to get you those answers. And so with that, we just want to thank you for hanging tough with us. We know it's late, and it's a Monday, top of the week. Thank you for engaging with us, and thank you for your love for Oakland. Have a great rest of your night.
Good evening. Thank you again for being with us. We actually have an announcement we are having another forum on Thursday, so I'm bringing Chris Logan to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Reverend Derica. My name is Chris Logan. I'm with Faith in Action East Bay. I want to thank the mayor for, Brooklyn. Want to thank the mayor. I think it really is appropriate to acknowledge the city's renewed commitment to ceasefire. Because this is a church that believes that that we don't just need to resort to putting black men in prison to address public safety. And so we just want to underscore and acknowledge that that's important to us, that you continue to provide people with resources, not just throw them in prison. I also want to acknowledge Justin Johnson, all those meetings we have with you about illegal dumping. We appreciate all your work on doing that with us as well. This Thursday, we'll be engaging with both the Oakland City Council District 1 candidates and the State Senate District 7 candidates, which includes Berkeley, Oakland, Richmond, Alameda. And so if you live in any of those areas, those candidates will be addressing those issues. We'll be asking about what are their plans around public safety? What are their plans around homelessness and housing? How will they address public safety without resorting to putting black and brown people in prison, as has been the history of people living in California? So I know we're putting you to work this week, but we do want to encourage you to come back this Thursday. We will be still serving dinner at 6, and we'll begin the programming at 6:15.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank you so much, Chris. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. I just wanted to take a moment to just say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. Thank you for writing 50 questions. Thank you for caring. And I understand there's some frustration. And it's different when you don't get to say your question and all the things that we're feeling, and righteous indignation about a lot of things. But what I see, and I'm so proud of, is the commitment to being accountable, to saying this is what we're doing, we're here, we're showing up, we're staying. I know it's been no dinner. I've got Go-Gurts up there for you, but I don't think that really cut it. But we disagree on some things, and I know that. But what I love about us is we see ourselves as one, and we show up for our city. And thank you so much. I learned quite a bit tonight and look forward to talking with almost all of you. Thank you so much, East Bay. I appreciate you, and thanks to all of you for being with us. Yes, thank you. Thank you. And please be safe getting home, and I look forward to even better Oakland.